Now, I had a pond like fairly similar to this at my parents' house. And what I used to do with my pond is I used to just have a 20-litre bucket, and I would, on a fairly regular basis, I'd just lower my bucket down into the pond, grab a bit of water out of the pond, throw it on the grass, throw it on the roses, just throw it around the place. And then that gives some nice high nutrient water for your garden, so your garden's happy enough with it. And if you're just doing a little bit regularly, you'll find that you don't even hardly notice that you're doing it, but at the same time you are doing water changes. Because what will tend to happen with your pond is, over a period of time, nutrients will build up in the pond and they'll accumulate. So if you're changing the water, then those nutrients are getting dispersed out, and those nutrients are quite good for the garden. Also, in this pond, when I sort of felt around, there was a fair bit of moss and stuff. Now, a little bit of that is actually quite good for us, but we don't really want it choking the pond up. So just grabbing handfuls of that out and throwing it in the garden doesn't hurt as well, because also that's nice and high nutrient. There's some beautiful plant growth in here, so I wouldn't go trying to put too many more goldfish in here, because as the goldfish get bigger, they'll get more and more destructive. And your little mini lilies and so forth, they're really quite beautiful. So you've got to make sure your greenery doesn't overgrow. But in general, the greenery in this pond is really nice. So don't be afraid to rip some out when there's too much in there. As far as adding extra fish, golden mountain clouds, the couple you've already got bouncing around in there, by all means you could add some of them. And there's also some really nice golden danios that you could look at adding. They would be quite a good option. You could look at rosy barbs. They would be an option as well. And most of these fish, it's really better to add them in summer. It's really better not to add any of these fish in winter, because in winter the pond can get quite cold and you don't want to pull them out of a nice warm aquarium shop and go throwing them into a pond. So doing that in the winter is not as ideal. Now,
regular is regular with the water?
Well, okay, so it's all relative to the amount of stock you have. So if you don't have many fish, which you do not now, you could pretty much almost never do water changes and you'll be okay. Obviously, you're going to need to top it up. So topping up from evaporation is not doing a water change. Doing a water change means you've actually taken water out and then you've put new water in again. That's a water change. And when you do that, once again, you're just going to add a bit of water ager, because we don't want to risk chlorine going into the pond. Otherwise, that can cause us a problem. So long and short of it is, anything is better than nothing. But if you, let's say once a week, just got 1 or 2 buckets out, that would be better than nothing. But in saying that, if you start stocking it so there's quite a lot of fish in there, then suddenly the water changes become very important, because the importance of the water change, or the importance of the amount of maintenance that you're doing on this pond, is completely relative to the amount of fish you have, because the amount of fish you have is completely relative to how much food that you need to feed. And then the next question is the quality of the food. So if you have just a nice light stock of fish, when we test the water, we'll find the water's quite good. On the other hand, if you start getting too many fish in the pond, then we'll start seeing the pH drop from the acids produced by the fish and the carbonic acid from the fish. We'll start seeing an increase of the ammonia and nitrite if the filter's not able to keep up. And then we'll start to see increases of phosphate and nitrate, which will cause more undesirable algae. And then we'll see that accumulate in the test kit that we do. So if you just about once a quarter bring a water sample down to Majestic Aquariums and a little video of the pond running, then we can have a look at it and we can tell you what needs to happen next. The other thing that we really want to see in the video is try and get a couple of close-ups of the fish, because we're really wanting to look at the fish to see if you're feeding enough. So basically, if you look down on the fish and you see their eyes, and then you see a little bit of a belly, that's okay. If you're seeing it go in after their gill plate, that means that you're not feeding enough. If you start seeing a big fat belly, then you're probably feeding too much, and just be aware that the fantails that you've got they are a sort of fat looking fish. So just take that into consideration. But when you bring the video to us, we can look on the video and see if you are feeding enough. So now the question becomes what to feed. In this particular pond, I would feed Spectrum's probiotics. Now the reason why I'd want to feed the probiotic bacteria or food is because the probiotic has a bacteria in the food, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. So it really helps to keep the pond clean. The other thing I'd think about adding to this pond too is a little bit of the water cleanser. So the water cleanser is a couple little balls, you chuck them in there, and then the water cleanser releases hydrocarbons into the water, and the hydrocarbons stimulate the growth of these little microorganisms that grow and compete with the algae and actually help to create a very clean, clear and healthy environment. So I'd probably have a look at that as well. But all in all, if we're looking at the fish and they're healthy, the next thing is how often you're feeding. So in winter, you want to hardly feed at all. Like you might want to feed once a week just to keep your little relationship with the fish. Because after a while, the fish will get to know you and the fish will respond to you. And quite often when the fish get to know you and they start to associate you as the dude that feeds them, when you walk up to the pond, you'll find they all come and gather where they know they're going to get a feed. But then sometimes somebody else will come and you'll tell them all about what your fish do. But then as soon as they see someone they don't know, they often go and hide. The other thing is that if it's a situation where there's only two, like in there, then they'll be very cautious. They'll tend to hide because in the natural environment, generally when there's more fish, then they're less stressed and they feel more safe. When there's not so many fish, then they don't tend to feel as safe and they tend to hide a lot more. So you'll get to understand that as you go. But this is a beautiful little pond, and with a very little bit of knowledge and understanding, it will definitely be a lot of joy.